Everyone, please join me in welcoming our final presenter for the day, Marcus Bacerra, a BFA candidate in watercolor painting.
Good morning, everybody. How are you feeling? Good? Thank you so much for being here today to hear what I have to say, but also to show up for my classmates and staff in the school. All right, back to the screen. All right, hello everyone. My name is Marcus Bacerra. I am graduating with a BFA specializing in watercolor. Today, I will be sharing with you the lessons I've learned and the revelations I've made in my final year at the Academy. My current body of work started with this painting from a series of work I created this summer titled Heaven on Earth. The piece was very simple, depicting a divine union between this figure and ribbon form, expressing the feeling of everything falling perfectly into place. The plastic ribbon form is flexible, fluid, and free in relation to the strength of the figure. The two subjects became ingrained in my vocabulary for their ability to not only show what it looks like to dance through life, but the freedom and satisfaction that comes with that. My obsession with these subjects brought me into a consistent practice in the last year. To me, these two became abstracted symbols for the body and the spirit, the physical and the non-physical. I started working with an inexpensive roll of paper that would last me around 3 to 4 paintings each. And I let the dimensions of each sheet I cut inspire the contents of each piece, and I worked larger than life to bring a sense of divinity and awe to the human condition. Working with a very limited palette of red paint and markers, I drew these drawings directly onto the paper, freely making marks with little to no preparation, allowing every mark I made to guide the next, resulting in these rhythmic compositions surrounding a figure and a ribbon, depicting conversations shared between the body and the spirit, and the relationship between the creator and creation. Exploring the different relationships the two could share often felt like a game for me, between my mind and my body, which in return elevate my spirit. These immersive works allowed me to focus and align every aspect of myself to fully engage in the act of creation. The ribbon could play with the figure. It would lean on it, support it, redirect and tease, and guide and protect. To me, these works displayed an innocent, unashamed, and childlike expression of creation. In addition to working with very accessible materials like Sharpies and a limited palette, a new freedom was brought to me in the way I created. This became a practice I did daily. I remember doing this piece directly after coming back from the beach on the last nice day of summer. I came back to school to cheer myself up the best way I could. I started drawing this reclining nude, what seemed like the most unashamed expression of joy, with a ribbon on the brink of flying away. As childish as it felt, I was genuinely upset and almost defeated about this change. This past summer, the beach had become an unexpected sanctuary for me, and I was not yet ready to give up the freedom and joy it brought me. But as I started to apply the red paint on the initial drawing, the new marker that I used started to bleed. Initially, this discovery was devastating to me, but I was determined to finish what I had started. As paint trickled down, colors began to merge together, and forms started to appear. What intended to be another playful, joyous celebration became this weeping departure, and simultaneously a welcome to a new beginning. Obviously, this piece has little to do with the beach, but the act of painting this directly after expressed what I could fully articulate on my own. The marker bleeding through brought a new depth, a new reality to these paintings. The works that started off clean and playful began to muddy up and even fall apart. The usual celebration I depict became a pity party, innocently expressing the pain and dread of loss, having to say goodbye and letting go. But still, this piece rejoices in what is to come. I continue to explore the relationship between the figure and the ribbon as they get more acquainted with each other. Entangled and intertwined, the relationship gets more and more complex. I also continued to explore the capabilities of the figure alone. The ability to be abstracted, contorted, distorted, and inflated. And I tried to keep pushing the boundaries of the space it consumed on the surface. Watch a Step was painted on a piece of wood from the watercolor room that had been previously utilized by students to mount and stretch their watercolor paper. My lovely teacher, Mr. Kennedy, gave this to me. He wanted me to consider the role and significance of the surface I paint on. With this piece, my symbols for the figure and ribbon get their first chance to step into the real world, outside of the white of the paper. Unlike the white of the paper, the real world is not always precious. It is rugged, it is tainted, and has history that surpasses even thought of its conception. The figure displays a sense of caution in his step and his discovery. He is unsure whether the ribbon is holding him back or bringing him forward. But most important, undeniably, there is a sense of guidance. But most importantly, this piece deeper explores the relationship between the real world and the unreal world, the seen and unseen being presented on the same plane. What does it look like for these imaginary ideas to be brought into the real world? How does it interact? How does it change? How does it continue to develop? What this piece really did was inspire me to bring this understanding of reality back into my world. I returned to my usual roll of paper with a slightly bolder approach. Other than the figure, the white of the paper is almost completely covered. As the figure and the ribbon start to realize the space they consume, things become more lively. They explore the freedoms of the confines of the paper and learn to embrace it. A background comes to life through expressive and aggressive marks, evoking a joyous, colorful, yet almost horrific celebration. There's a dance occurring, but the relationship feels a bit more confrontational. The figure is equally pulling away as it is pushing the ribbon into a corner. The ribbon appears passive in its gesture, yet suggests to equally pushing back. There's an apparent sense of harmony, but something feels uneasy. As this painting attempts to bring reality into its world, the relationship becomes more intense, more layered, nuanced, and less pure. It reiterates a question I constantly ask with my work. What does it mean to be free? What does it look like? What does it feel like? I consider dance to be a very universal symbol for freedom, allowing your body to move in harmony with rhythm and allowing that to flow through you. I think the ultimate image of freedom for me was the ending of The Wiz. As the ruling of the Wicked Witch comes to an end, everyone naturally strips naked in freedom, rejoicing and singing and dance. In this painting, another dance is occurring between the two, but there's a different type of tension. There's still an apparent rhythm and flow between the two, but they dance in a way that is almost uneasy. Still in celebration, the figure and ribbon are showered in bright colors, with marks mimicking the light of a disco ball, further expanding and establishing the space the figure consumes. The essence of this painting is recognizing the joy found in something you shouldn't be doing. The ability to identify pleasure, even joy, in guilt or temptation is a pretty ridiculous statement to think about. But how alive have you felt doing something you probably shouldn't be? With this piece titled Look at Yourself, I wanted to continue playing with light. I started this painting with an initial wash of yellow, establishing the original beam. The way the spotlight divided up the paper and established the rest of the piece. With a heightened awareness of space, fractal shapes began to form a composition, intuitively revealing this abstracted dance floor. In the light, things began to get more sculpted, more realized, while other parts retracting, simplifying and flattening. I wanted this piece to demonstrate the act of self-reflection, observing oneself in the way that we act and the way that we perform, attempting to view ourselves from different perspectives and on different levels. This was the last painting I did in 2021, and at the time, the most paint I put down on one of these paintings. The figure appears to be simultaneously striking an extravagant pose and dance, and rising as though he's being brought to life. Though almost uncomfortable, the figure thrives, glowing in the light. Outside the light, the figure continues to be adorned by a mosaic of color. Though still relying on abstraction to describe the space feels equally referential to a dance floor as it does to a bed. The swatches of paint resemble tiled lights just as much as they do a quilted blanket. The figure could easily be on the dance floor or laying outstretched on a bed. Along with the others, This piece reiterates the idea of dancing through life, while additionally expressing the satisfaction of gently and gracefully waking up. Starting the new year, I wanted to go back to basics a bit and find what more was to be discovered with these two. In addition to the usual figure and ribbon, I started painting these ghosted limbs in gold. With a repetition that almost felt like a strobing light, the visual allowed me to express motion. Simultaneously, I began working with clay to realize the figure in 3 dimensions, giving representations of what it looks like to be in the real world. The figure no longer confines to a flat surface, but there is still an apparent flatness in its depiction. Now completely off the paper, the figure must acquaint itself with the new world. Yet as the figure appears to be more grounded, he finds himself becoming more dimensional. The figures gradually become more expressive. As the forms twist, there's a greater exploration of movement, and there's an increasing sense of freedom, grace, and joy, giving visions of the possibility of complete freedom. After working in 3 dimensions, I returned to working on paper. I created this piece titled Listen to the Beat, further exploring the figure and its capabilities. With a deeper understanding of its form, a conversation started to form between the body and these ghosted limbs that now became beams of light. The figure more deeply explores itself, finding new ways to express the body within the rectangle it lives within. He's not afraid to take up space. He's empowered by the freedom of his confines. This painting demonstrates in a more literal way the attempt to free oneself. The figure almost appears to be breaking through the plane of the paper. In addition to these ghosted limbs, I went back to exploring this gridded dance floor motif in a more specific way. Though abstracted, there's an awareness of perspective. While still chaotic in nature, the background achieves a clear sense of order. This piece was heavily influenced by Michelangelo's unfinished sculptures of emerging slaves that depicts figures still freeing themselves from the stone they live within. I was always inspired by Michelangelo's desire to honor the beauty in the human form, in addition to his ability to find the life that resides in the material he utilizes. These sculptures are on the brink of freedom. Though liberating, the emergence almost looks painful. This piece further pushed the relationship between the real world and the unreal, as half the figure is reduced to ghosted limbs of light, while the rest of the body stands solid with inherent form to its figure, casting shadows upon himself. It is unclear whether the figure is stepping in or stepping out of worlds, is existing somewhere in between. The figure celebrates liberation despite this discomfort that it might bring. My final sculpture is almost fully grounded. Though fully free, the figure must bring a new awareness to the weight of the world. Things might get heavy, more real, but still the figure maintains a sense of flatness, playfulness, elevation, and freedom. In my final piece titled Get Into It, I depart from the paper, creating the first painting of this series on canvas. I created this piece with the intention of creating a closing to this body of work and finding ways to coordinate and culminate the motifs and language I've developed throughout the year, in addition to creating the biggest painting I've ever made. The two stand comfortable, completely in balance. The two are rhythmically united and aligned in perfect harmony. The ghosted limbs are still present, but the motion feels intentional. It is no longer as concerned about discovery as the figure is completely sure of itself. The background starts to melt into itself, despite achieving the greatest sense of order yet. Things become more realized and sculpted than ever as the two come together and gracefully reunite. Though my work can be interpreted in a variety of complex ways, at its core, my paintings are very simple. I repeatedly depict a figure in a ribbon attempting to make sense of its relationship, to make sense of its existence, questioning the world it lives within. I create paintings that serve to uplift people, asking us to question reality, what is real to us, and how do things become real. But above all, my work is an invitation to join the eternal party that is the celebration of life. How do we free ourselves? How do we dance through life? How does our body harmonize with our spirit? How do we live with ease in a world that is not easy? What does it even mean to live? Find what makes you free and free yourself. Thank you for coming today. I appreciate you.